it's only stressful if you take the identity of a victim. And for people listening, it could be like, I got to buy a rental property at the end of the year. If you come at it from the perspective of I'm a victim, or this is going to be hard, or I can't do this, it's not going to be enjoyable to be like, oh, I got to go buy that rental property. Instead, it's like if you go in there as like a hero, like, you know, you're William Wallace going to go like rescue the Scots or something. Like, just that mindset shift is like, no, like I'm a warrior. I'm going to battle. I'm going to figure this thing out.
And everybody, welcome to the 0 to 100 podcast. We've got a very special guest today. It's a guy named Brandon Turner. So if you don't know who Brandon Turner is, he's the founder and managing member of Open Door Capital, best-selling real estate author with over 1 million copies sold. He's the former host of the Bigger Pockets Real Estate Podcast with over 100 million downloads. He's currently the host of the Better Life Podcast and has over 1 million downloads.
That sounds depressing. I got to edit that bio. Geez. Bigger Pockets, 100 million downloads. Oh, new one, million downloads. Oh, who has that bio? Keep going. I want to hear about myself.
We have 32 downloads. But,
yeah, 32 downloads.
Yeah, my mom has downloaded our podcast 32 times. So over the past decade, Brandon has established a strong track record investing in multifamily, including apartments, mobile home parks, and he's a strong case study. Open Door Capital currently has nearly 1 billion assets under management and 2,500 plus investors. And I love this, man. He's got this with the Better Life Tribe. He's got a goal to give away $1 billion to fight human trafficking and other topics around lifestyle design, personal development, personal brand. And he's a badass. Christian. You lead worship. I love that. He's a guitar player and he's a rocker. So
I'm gonna get a T-shirt that says "Badass Christian." I actually really like that.
I know.
That's good.
Right. Can just put like Travis Dillard at the bottom of that. So,
yeah.
So Brandon, this is, I still think that's an impressive intro. I mean, a lot of zeros and a lot of millions and billions and hundreds of millions. And so like, you're such an amazing dude. I'm going to give you some instructions here. This is called a podcast. So on podcasts, we ask questions and you answer. So it's probably a new format for you.
Yeah, I'm learning. I learn quick.
Yeah. And Mitch, Gabe, and I we're just humans. You don't need a fanboy over us. We're just regular people. We put our pants on one leg at a time.
Have you seen Mitchell? Have you seen him?
I mean,
how can you not?
I don't know what you mean by that. I don't know.
Gabe, we have someone else talking crap about Mitch on the podcast.
Well, Brandon called me Mitchell twice and then Mitch Hole probably 50 times after he learned fast that I can.
All right. No more messing around, Brandon. But let's go back. Like before you had $1 billion worth of real estate. That's not where you started. I think $1 billion of real estate probably intimidates a lot of people. $1 million of real estate intimidates some people. A duplex intimidates some people. So you didn't always have $1 billion worth of real estate. I mean, at some point.
No, I had $2 billion. I just lost $1 billion. It was a rough decade.
Wait, is Heather still with you? Heather didn't take the other billion.
Yeah, I inherited $2 billion from my dad, and I lost $1 billion of it.
I love it. Well, we should probably be done with this. Then I think
end of podcast.
Congratulations!
Good seeing you, man.
Let's go back to before you had any real estate when you were little Brandon. So you were like my size back when you were 8.
Yeah, 6.
6. All right, fair. But how'd you get into real estate? I mean, you're obviously a big name and from Bigger Pockets, you have Open Door Capital, but at some point, like everybody that gets started, you had no real estate. So let's go back to little Brandon before you had real estate, before real estate was even kind of on the radar.
Yeah, so my real estate kind of story starts. I was working this overnight job where I had to it was like a house of developmentally disabled adults. And so I was like the overnight supervisor. So I just had to stay awake. That was my job. It was like job description, stay awake. So I had to sit there and just stay awake. So I'd watch the house flipping shows, like the Flip That House, Flip This House that were popular back in the early 2000s. And I would just start learning how to flip houses. And I thought, that's so cool. I want to do that. But I was obviously, 20 or 19 and 20, broke. Never thought I'd actually get into real estate, but I did rent an apartment, just like a 4-bedroom apartment. And I rented out the other bedrooms, 3 of them, to just like buddies of mine. And then they all left because they didn't want to live with me. So I rented out to 3 strangers. which worked out. I was house hacking before I knew what house hacking was, just with a rental. And then I learned if I rented out my bedroom, then I could live like for free, even make a little bit of money. So I then moved onto the couch and I rented my bedroom out. And then I realized living on the couch was hard. So I moved into my car. So I ended up living in my car for a good portion of that year.
You didn't even own the property.
Nope. I just rented an apartment building. Yeah. I just didn't want to pay rent. And so I lived in my car for a little while. Like I worked the overnight job, so I didn't have to sleep overnight. So I'd sleep in my car during the day. And, that's how I got into real estate. It all started there. I eventually decided, hey, it'd be nice to actually own a house. And this is like 07, 06, 07, right? So I talked to this woman who was like, her sister was a friend of my wife's or girlfriend at the time. She was a real estate agent. And I was like, hey, I need a place to rent or buy or something. And she's like, yeah, just call this mortgage person. And I talked to the mortgage person. They're like, well, what's your credit? And I'm like, I don't have any. And like, what do you make? And I'm like, $9 an hour. And they're like, okay, well, you're approved for like $1 million. And I'm like, this is amazing. Sold. So I bought the cheapest house I could find and I rented out all the bedrooms once again, and house hacked my way into my very first deal, fixed it up, sold it, made 20 grand, got married, and that's how it started.
So were you still at that job, the same job for those years, or did you bounce around?
It was, that whole thing was over the course of about a year and a half. And so I was at the same job I went from Cold Stone Creamery, where I was scooping ice cream, to that job that was the overnight one, kind of all in that process.
I never knew that.
Yeah, those are good years right there, being broke and living on a couch.
And in a car.
Yeah, I don't talk about it too much, but and I'm tall. You guys know this.
Yeah.
I'm like, what, 6'5"? So I was like in the back of this little like Toyota Camry, and I would drive my wife to work in the morning. Well, she was girlfriend at the time, but I get off work, pick up my wife, girlfriend, drive her to work, and then I would sleep in the car till lunchtime, in which we'd have lunch together. Then I would go back to sleep and sleep in the car till 4 when she got off work, and then we'd hang out in the evening. Then I would go back to work again that night. And it was actually pretty a cool system. I just had to sleep crunched up in the back of a Toyota Camry.
I seen the early photos of you, and you look like I'd find you a Cold Stone. Like you have a Cold Stone vibe to you early on.
I'm going to take that as a really good compliment, because Cold Stone, I gained 40 pounds that year. True story.
So much.
They used to give you a free ice cream every time you worked. And I worked like 6 days a week at Cold Stone. So
just calories.
Dude, it was so much ice cream and it was so good. They even named an ice cream after me. It was called the Brandon Tea. It's cake batter ice cream, cookie dough, Oreo pie crust, whipped cream mixed in.
I love it.
The Brandon Tea. And you got to have the gotta have it size, which is like the gallon. Dude, you guys haven't lived unless you've had a Brandon Tea.
All right. So but you bought that first place. And I mean, were you sold right then? You were like, all right, real estate's my thing, or it took a couple deals before you were like, real estate's really my thing, and this is how I'm going to make some real money. And
yeah, that's a great question. So no, the first deal didn't really convince me. What actually convinced me was the second deal. What I mean by that is the first one, I sold the house, and actually the reason I sold it because I had this thought. I was sitting in church one day. I went to visit like my parents' like church in Minnesota. And I'm sitting there and like not listening at all and paying attention. And then the thought just went in my head, like, you should go backpack Europe for a year. And I'd never thought about that in my life. Just in the middle of church, I just started daydreaming about like backpacking Europe for a year. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do it. How could I do it? I could sell my house. I don't need a house. I'll just sell my house. I'm going to go backpack Europe for a year. So I sell the house. That's actually what made me want to sell it. And then instead of going to Europe for a year, I bought a wedding because I proposed and I used all the money for the wedding, which was probably in retrospect, a decent choice. I didn't like have any ambitions to be a real estate investor still at that point. I mean, I was still watching the flipping shows. I thought it was cool, but it wasn't until I bought the first property. I bought a duplex. It was 2 houses on one lot. And I got basically an FHA loan on it. But I didn't even have the money for the FHA loan. I think on that one, I borrowed it from my dad. I was like, hey, can I borrow $2,500? And he had a line of credit. So he gave me a line of credit from his line of credit for like $2,500. It was a $75,000 duplex in Aberdeen, Washington. Well, technically Hoquiam. And I remember like I bought the property. I fixed up the front house. There's 2 houses. I fixed up the front house. It just needed like, the typical paint and made it, some carpet I laid down. And then I rented it to a buddy of mine, which is a terrible idea. Don't rent to your friends. But I rented it to a buddy of mine. and he gives me like $650 in cash, and I'm standing in this alleyway between these two houses, and he handed me $650 in cash, and it totally looks like a drug deal going down. But I remember holding that money going like, I don't have to like pay to live anymore. Like I'm living for free in my own house. That's the coolest thing ever. That was like insight number one, is like, this is super cool. And then insight number two was, well, what if I did this again and again and again and again? I mean, like, if it worked with one, why don't I just buy a lot of them? And so that started me on my kind of journey to collecting rental units, which worked out pretty well over the next decade.
In your mind, back then, what was a lot of units? I mean, you got $650 cash. You're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm literally not having to do anything for this money except for own the property. But I'm curious to your mindset back then when you said there were a lot of properties or a lot of units. What was that number?
Yeah, it was $3,000 a month. The only number I ever thought of early on was like, if I could make $3,000 a month, I will retire. I will be done for life. I will be set. I mean, $36,000 a year, you guys, is pretty like top shelf. So like I that was the number I went for. I never had dreams or ambitions to make more than that. Yeah, I got it. It took me 7 years to get the $3,000. Well, 6 years to get the $3,000 a month. I got it because I bought it like a duplex, another duplex, triplex, a fourplex, and then a 24 unit that I got on seller financing. And when I got the 24 unit, I was done. I had $3,500 a month or whatever it was coming in, a little over 3,000, and I literally quit my job. I took a job for a while at a bank. I quit my job and I sat on the couch and I said, I'm retired. At 27, I am retired, and I just stopped working. And I watched a lot of Law and Order. Like, I'm not kidding. Like, every day I'd watch like 4 episodes of Law and Order. And retirement was terrible.
Was terrible.
It's so funny. Like, you and I have very similar stories in that I was also 27, except for my cash flow number was $1,500 a month. So I was done and retired, but like I was still poor. 36,000 a year would have been great at that time for me. But I'm curious, like, I know that now, I've been fortunate to spend a lot of time with you. You're a big thinker. You have a big vision. You set these big goals. Do you think for most people that having a smaller goal, and then for some that might not be a small goal, but that 36,000, like it's good or better to have that goal of like, hey, $3,000 a month over say, oh, I want to make $100,000 a month and the person's still working a, say, minimum wage job? Do you think having a more attainable, realistic goal initially and hitting that goal and then kind of going to that next level? Or do you think having a big vision and a big goal is the thing that's really going to get you there?
That is such a great question. Here's what I'll say. I mean, I think either could work, but I think having a monster big vision makes you think bigger. And so what I mean by that is this. If I would have come out of the gate and said, I want $100,000 a month in passive income, I would have played a very different game. I would have been having different conversations, attending different masterminds, different meetups. I'd be reading different books. And I probably would have gotten, I mean, maybe I wouldn't have gotten 100,000 a month, but I might have gotten 20 or 30 or 40,000 a month because I was just playing a different game, right? It's the age old like story I tell all the time. Like Cam Cathcart, who I think some of us know, Cameron, his first year in real estate did 100 flips and wholesale deals. Why? Because all his buddies were doing 100 wholesale deals and flips. Like, it was just, that's what you do. So like that, he built systems to get him 100 a year. The same, the question I was trying to solve for was, how do I get 3,000 a month? And the questions you ask yourself, you will solve. Like if you're an ambitious person, if you're a high achieving person, you will answer whatever question you ask yourself the hardest and the longest. And I don't regret asking myself the question of how do I make $3,000 a month? But yeah, if I would have asked $30,000 a month, I would have probably made a lot more money. And actually, I would have made decisions like maybe, insulating that house myself isn't the greatest use of my time. Maybe my time should be spent on finding more deals or training up new partners or raising capital, like the higher dollar per hour tasks. So yeah, the questions you ask yourself, I mean, they determine the quality of your life, the quality of your questions.
Well, you hit on, and you talk about, like, you read about that in the 10X is, bigger than 2X, but like it also helps you get clarity on what not to do. Because like you said, we all have 24 hours in the day. And then if you're focusing on trying to get an extra $300 a month in positive cash flow, you're not focusing on getting $5,000 or $10,000 a month in positive cash flow. My question to you though is like, because we always ask people on this podcast, like everybody has a why, like what's your burning why? Like, because shit gets hard sometimes, right? It gets tough. Like what keeps you going? But your burning why was like, I just like Gabe, I just want to retire. I want to quit my day job, get 40, 50 hours a week back. Was that, do you think that time that you spent between the Law and Order episodes, you know, like being reflective on like, do you think you were like, did you then develop your why to then grow this massive empire that you built at that point? Did it take getting 40 hours a week back to sort of like think that way?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if this answers that question, but like, I feel like I needed that space that like get me to $3,000 a month, because like what I call it is like level 1 financial freedom, right? There's like, if I want to define it as like 3 levels, there's like, I don't know if I could have even envisioned level 2 and 3.
Can we call it R1?
We could call R1. Oh, that's right. I like, you guys call it R1. That's way better. I was actually jealous that you came up with that. So like R1, like you need to get that level R1. Like I needed to, not that everyone does, but I needed to see that that was possible before I could even envision another level. And so I did that. I got that, and it worked, and I got there, and so I don't regret that. Like I don't regret not asking the $30,000 question. I don't regret like, you know, that it was a hard 6 years that I know today I could avoid it if I would just give myself some advice and been like, hey, maybe you should aim a little higher than that. So
what kind of questions are you asking yourself today?
Ooh, that's a great question. I'm asking myself, how do I give away $1 billion? That's a question that I think about a lot. I just think it's a fun North Star of like that would be almost not impossible to hit. I think it is possible, but it's very hard to hit that, to give away $1 billion over someone's life. And so like, that makes me think, okay, well, you know, for example, the Better Life Tribe, it's like the 100% profits go to charity. It's like an accountability thing. So I'm like, okay, if I had 10,000 people paying $500 a month over the course of 10 years, that's $1 billion. But like, if I would have said, how do I give away $1 million? I wouldn't have thought that big. I would have said, oh, I could have 50 people paying $100 a month and I can give away that money. So yeah, I ask, how do I give away $1 billion? I ask myself all the time, how do I get a private jet? Like I jokingly build businesses because I want a private jet. It's kind of like Gary Vaynerchuk, the social media guy. He always talks about buying the New York Jets. He once said, he's like, I don't actually care about the New York Jets. I just needed I need a North Star that says I'm going to work to get that. And if he ever got it, it would be super like not that exciting. And if I ever got an actual private jet, I'd be like, oh, cool. That's neat. And then I'd move on with my life. But
now I got to maintain it, or now
exactly. Yeah. There's other problems with it.
But you do have a pretty cool jet service that we flew on with one of your masterminds, which was pretty awesome. That was pretty fun.
They went under.
No, is that right?
Yeah, they went bankrupt.
I was wondering about that model. I'm like, I don't know if this is gonna.
They had to get like twice as many members. I mean, it was a cool model if you could get enough rich people to do it. They had to get like 180 members, and they could never get past like 100, 110.
Imagine if they would have just invested in real estate instead.
I know, they could have actually made something. But you know, we had a good time on the plane, so you know, whatever. It was a good time.
So Brandon, going back to like your, you know, you have the Law and Order like binge or whatever that is, and then at what point like did you start to like scale, like go, hey, this is something I want to do, like and maybe talk about that first, like I think you said 24 unit property or something, seller finance. That had to be a big light bulb too, right? Like that's way more than a duplex or triplex. Maybe talk about the scale, the point in your journey of scale.
Yeah. I love the concept of scaling a lot. I teach a lot about it. I kind of obsess about it because at the end of the day, like it can feel overwhelming to somebody to go from like I remember back in the day, I used to watch Scott McGilvory on HGTV's Income Property. The show was just this guy, Scott, who's a real estate investor in Canada, and he would like turn attics and basements into rentable space. It was called Income Property. I love this show. It made a big impact on me. But the beginning of every episode, the start, they would always say, Scott is a real estate investor and blah, blah, blah. And he has 100 units. And I remember always thinking like, how the heck does somebody get 100 units? That's absolutely insane. It was such a massive number because my mindset was buy one house a year, maybe two on a good year, you know, like flip one, maybe hold one as a rental. Like that's the scale I operated the first few years, 3, 4, 5 years, because I was thinking linearly, like in a line. So you buy two each year, buy one each year. That would take me 50 years to get to 100 units if I buy 2 a year. I wasn't thinking exponentially. So today I'm always teaching people exponential growth, right? Like going from 0 to 100 doesn't mean you buy one house a year for 100 years. I'm guessing you guys don't teach that.
We
The
do
idea is
actually.
you
Maybe you buy you don't like that framework?
Wait, I don't. Yeah.
you might want to workshop that one a little bit more. You buy the house and then you maybe buy a duplex. And then when you're feeling comfortable, you're like, okay, I got this down. I'm going to buy a 5 unit. And it's like, okay, I got that down. I'm going to buy a 20 unit. And then I'm going to buy a 50 unit. And before you know it, you did it. You're at 100 units. And it's not actually that hard. So in other words, scaling, when I went from, the duplex, whatever, like buying a couple at a time, and all of a sudden I land the 24 unit apartment building, which came from a cool conversation with an old couple from church. It's a long story there, but miraculously, this 24 unit falls in my lap. And it's one of those like luck meets preparation things. And I ended up landing this 24 unit. And that was, that was a big leap. I had maybe 15 units at the time between duplexes and fourplexes and such. Going to 24, that was a leap, but it wasn't an impossible leap. Going from 15 to 25 and only half of them were rented out, that's doable. I learned. And then later on, years later, now I'm fast forwarding to my open door capital days. My first mobile home park I partnered with Ryan Murdoch on was a 50 unit. Again, I went from 24-ish, 30 something units to 50. And then I bought another 50, and I was at like 100. And all of a sudden, in 2 purchases, I did the number of units that I did in the 10 years previously. And then in the subsequent years now, in the last 2 years, I bought more than I did the first, 15 years combined. So scale, I don't know if this perfectly answers your question because I'm all over the place, but scaling has made my life easier. I have worked fewer hours on my real estate. It has been easier and more fun. And so with scaling, that's kind of what I learned there, is that scaling is fun. I really enjoy it. And I think everyone should aim for that.
I love that answer. And I think also scaling is like the exponential results happening kind of on the back end. It took me a long time to get my first one. Then the second one came quicker. Then the third one came faster. And so it's like, just like you said, with Open Door, the amount you're buying today is just exponentially greater than what took you 10 years to get. And we talk about that a lot with our elites in our mastermind. We're like, look, the first one is like getting through a wall. It's super hard to get through. And then once you hit R1, you have the time to look for deals, and then that speeds up, and then you're free,
And we say this all the time, we have different phases in our sort of R1 framework, and everybody looks at the last phase and you look like an overnight success. Like, oh my gosh, Brandon Turner just grew to 1 billion units, and or whatever the crazy amount. But it's all those sort of fundamental phases of buying that duplex, figuring it out, understanding how to buy in the right location and cash flow, then getting maybe a 5 unit or bigger, and then force appreciating it. And that's a big light bulb moment for everybody. Oh my gosh, I can actually control the amount of value that I increase this property. So yeah, I love that, man. So it's not an overnight success.
That's why I kind of disagree. And I don't know your guys' thoughts on this. I'd be curious, but Grant Cardone is really fond of saying you shouldn't buy anything less than 50 units or whatever. Start with a 50 unit apartment building. I'm not sure a person who has never bought a duplex has the ability to go buy a 50 unit. I could buy the 50 unit because I bought the 20 unit, and I could buy the 20 unit because I bought the 2 unit. There are exceptions to that rule, of course, and maybe it's a limiting belief. But I really think you learn lessons on cheaper properties and make the mistakes on the small deals. And so at the end of the day, it doesn't even matter. When people are like, oh, I bought this property and I thought it was going to cash flow $200 a month, and instead I lose $100 a month on it. Boo-hoo. I'm like, who cares? You did your first deal. It doesn't really matter. In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. What matters is the 100 unit or the 50 unit down the road, or the portfolio of 30 houses that you manage. That's what matters. The first deal that's a $80,000 crappy house in the ghetto, who cares?
Yeah, well, getting the notoriety and the equity is worth more than the $100 you're losing, and just the self-confidence to be able to take it to the next level.
Yeah.
So this conversation kind of makes me think of the question that you used to ask on Bigger Pockets all the time was, I'm paraphrasing here, but why is it that some investors, they never start, they give up, or they fail? And I'm curious, why do you think that? You've interviewed hundreds, if not thousands of guests, and I see that a lot as well. People get excited about real estate. They know real estate is a great way to build wealth, to achieve cash flow, to achieve financial freedom, time freedom. But why do you think that the majority of people, the reality is they're either afraid to get started, or they start and they quit, or they fail once and they're like, this is hard and I'm done. So I'm curious, why do you think that a majority appears to be in that boat of like, never start, give up, or fail?
Yeah, I forgot that I asked that question. That's funny. A decade
Like a
of
million
asking it,
times.
I totally forgot that.
You asked it like a million times,
Yeah.
Brandon. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally forgot.
It's like 20 years of your life, but no
Yeah,
big deal.
yeah.
No, we're asking you, Nick. I don't know,
I blocked
actually.
out
That's a
the
dumb
part.
question. Move on. Next
Yeah.
question.
No, I actually have a good answer for this. I think I have a good answer for this. I was on the phone with a buddy the other day, a friend of mine, and I've been helping him through he's got some business struggles. And so I said, hey, I'll coach you. Like every week, we'll just talk on the phone for 30 minutes and I'll coach you. And just try to give you a sounding board to work through your financial problems with your business. And so I'm talking to him he's like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. And I'm like, all right, so, where's your income? Where's your expenses? That's the conversation. He's like, I'm not really sure. I haven't really done my finances very well. I'm like, all right, so what are you going to do this week? He's like, well, he's like, okay, well, I don't know. I'm like, well, what if you downloaded your bank statement? That's it. Just download your bank statement. He's like, yeah, that's a good idea. Cause I was like, then in my head, I'm thinking, okay, next week I'll give him a task of going through the bank statement and giving like each dollar a category. So at least we can start to put together a budget. Right. And so a week goes by and we get back on the call and I'm like, all right, so you printed the statements. And he goes, no, I didn't get it. I'm like, what do you mean you didn't get to it? He's like, yeah, I didn't get time. I'm like, it's one click, man. It's 30 seconds. That's all you had to do all week long was a 30-second task. He's like, yeah, I know. I was just really busy. All right. Well, can you do that this week? We get it printed this week. Yeah, no problem. Week later, get on the call, complaining about all his problems, all his financial problems. Like, okay, let's look at your numbers. I didn't get a chance to print it yet. I'm like, what am I doing on this call?
Jeez.
Like, what am I doing? This actually, though, is why people don't succeed in real estate, is because there's only about 20 actions that a real estate investor does. Like, I'm convinced there's like 20 things we do. The four of us could sit down and list them off. It's like analyze a deal, right? Make an offer, drive for dollars, do some kind of marketing, have a phone call with a seller. That's 5 of them. I don't even know what the rest of them are. Like, there's not a lot of stuff. This is the simplest business in the world.
Network,
Yeah, that's
building
it.
relationships. Yeah, there
That's
might be
all.
10, maybe
It's
10.
like the 2 simplest businesses, like prostitution and real estate investment. It doesn't get any more easy than this.
And Mitch has been successful
Mitch
at
just does
both.
both.
Well, that's a whole other
Mitchell-
podcast.
Mitchell
so
knows
we'll-
all about it.
we
It's a whole
won't-
other podcast.
That's his other podcast.
Why can't people do the action? Like, why don't they print their bank statement, or why don't they make the phone call? And so the reason some people give up and fail and never get started is because they can't print the freaking bank statement. They can't make the call or do the action. Like, all success is made up of a series of 5-minute tasks. If there's one thing people get from today's conversation, is remember that all success, everything you could possibly want in life, is like a series of 5-minute tasks or less. And the better you are at identifying that task, this is what the task is, and then doing the task. So even like losing weight, okay, the task is I need to pick out a meal for tonight. The task is I have to order some food on my Instacart to get it delivered to my door. Like, those are 5-minute tasks. And if you just did them, you would lose weight. If you want, you got to make a phone call, go on Zillow, send that message. It's 5-minute tasks, almost everything. If you just did them, you'd accomplish everything.
My question for you on that conversation, though, is like, when he says, I'm so busy, I don't have time to download my bank statement. Like,
Yeah.
and this is Freddie, this is common across people that don't take action. They're busy. They're moving a million different directions and they're going nowhere. Like, what was he busy doing? Like, lamenting about the fact he had no money?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I try to drill them on it a little bit. Because everyone says, what I encourage people, whenever I'm doing any kind of coaching or some kind of level of that, whenever people say I don't have time, I always try to reframe that and make them say I didn't prioritize it, right? Because that's really what it is. And in reality, that's usually what it is they just didn't think about it. It was important on the phone call. And then you get into what they call like the whirlwind. There's a great book called 4 Disciplines of Execution. And it calls like the whirlwind is just life. Kids crying and customers complaining and all this, right? Whirlwind. As we lose focus on the most important things in the whirlwind. And if we had a system in which we would not lose focus on the important thing, we would accomplish so much. That's why one like thing I teach a lot is called the weekly one. I got the idea from the book, The One Thing, right? So every week I write down my 3 goals for the quarter on every Sunday night. I literally do this every Sunday night. What are my 3 goals for the quarter? One's always a real estate business goal. One's always a fitness goal. And one's usually a relationship goal. And then next to that goal, I write down, what is my weekly one? In other words, what is the one thing this week I will accomplish to move the ball down the field, like in this category? So now I have 3 goals for the quarter, and I have 3 weekly ones. A weekly one for my relationship, weekly one for my health, and a weekly one for my business. And then that weekly one, I look at it every single morning. And if I can schedule it, I schedule it. Because that way it doesn't get lost in the whirlwind quite so easy, because I see it every single day. So yeah, I think people just get lost in it.
I love that answer. And I think when this podcast gets released, anyone that hears that needs to go back and listen to it, because those 5-minute things, I mean, so many of those tasks are maybe not even 5 minutes, and people are not willing to do those things. And it seems like those that are willing to do, they have a level of success much greater than those that are just not willing to do those little things that don't take up a lot of time or a lot of effort, actually.
But it also focuses you on being really clear about, like, there's a lot more power in thinking about the weekly one than actually writing it down. Like, what is that one? What's going to be the most impactful thing? By the way, the plug for Brandon's journal. I use your journal all the time, your goal setting journal. You guys, you still doing that?
Yeah. Yeah. The Intention Journal is still available on Amazon and wherever books are sold.
Okay. Yeah. I love that.
But I don't have the weekly one in there. I don't think. At least I didn't call it that. But here's the funny thing about the weekly one is I actually struggle sometimes, like, identifying what that is. It does take a little bit of time. It takes more time to think about what the weekly one should be than it does to actually do the weekly one usually. And so, like, that planning time every Sunday night when I spend 20 or 30 minutes just thinking, like, what is this week going to be? Like, what's the most important thing? That has proven to be so effective. And majority of people do not take time out of their week or day to just think. It's just go, 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 whirlwind, and they don't have time, right? There's a famous line for that. I think Mark Twain once said. He said, "I apologize for the length of this letter. If I had more time, I would have made it shorter." And I always love that line of, if I had more time, make it shorter, because there's such, like, if we had more time allotted, we can really, like, get more focused and dialed on what it is we really want to do and say. And so when we lack that time, that's when things just get word vomited. That's when things don't get clear. That's when we're not sure what the next step is. And every single person can find 30 minutes a week of thinking time. And if you don't think that, if you're listening to this right now, you don't think that, grab your phone with me. If you have an iPhone, open it up, go to settings, go down to screen time, and then tell me what it says. And if yours says 21 minutes average per day, then I'll believe you. But if yours has anything on there that has anything that's remotely time wasting, you have time. It's just priorities. You're not prioritizing thinking time.
So, Brandon, when I listen to you, I think about, like, when I meet people that are really, really successful, like yourself,
and handsome.
And you're a beautiful man. I'm not gonna doubt that. I've thought that since day one.
How do you know? I mean, most of the space is covered up with this thing hanging there.
15 years ago, I didn't even know it was a real estate podcast. I just saw his picture. I'm like, I gotta be involved somehow.
He's a beautiful,
handsome man
podcast. Yeah, like, it's anyway.
Keep coming.
So
this is good.
So, but when I talk to really, really successful people, I realize, like, there's this simplicity to it. Like, even, like, when we, like, even the Maui Mastermind, right? Like, everyone has, like, a couple goals, and, like, it seems like the more successful, the more simple, which, like, most people would think it's, like, more complex. So, like, do you find that as well because you talk to a lot of people, like, they're extremely successful on your podcast and in your circles. Like, do you see that there's, like, a simplicity that's purposeful?
Yeah. Almost every person I know that's wildly successful does very, very little to get there. Like, the whole idea of, like, you have to have 7 income streams. That's what an average millionaire has. No, they had one that they became a millionaire, and then maybe they added some more streams on, right? But, like, in the beginning, like, they picked one thing and they became a millionaire that way, because otherwise you're you're building multiple bridges. And when you try to build 5 bridges at a time over to Fantasy Island, it takes 5 times longer to build those bridges because you have constrained resources. Unless you're super rich, you just hire a bunch of, bridge builders. You're building these bridges one at a time. And even that, like, I had the thought, like, hey, I'm rich. I can hire a bunch of bridge builders. So I've started 5 businesses in the last year and a half. And they crawl. Like, they are really crawling slow because, like, I still can, like, I'm still the leader. I still can only give so much attention to each thing. So, yeah, the simplicity of doing fewer things, of saying no to way more things, to say no to the average and the good, so you can say yes to the great, is like a resounding similarity between all super wealthy people that I know.
Kind of on that same line of thought, Brandon, are there things that you are taking off your plate today that you said yes to maybe 5 years ago, 2 years ago, even a year ago, but you're saying no today so that you can focus on those couple things that are actually really important to you?
Man, I struggle with this so much. I want people to know that like, if you're like, man, I'm really bad at focusing, I want to do too much stuff, just know that I'm there too. Like, it's really, really, really hard for me. Like, I should shut down about half my businesses so that I can make sure the other ones thrive. I can't do it yet. And so instead I just suffer and I work 100 hours a week. And so, like, but yes, there are a few, like, I've stopped surfing. I haven't surfed in 6 months, probably. I haven't done jujitsu in 6 months. Now part of that is just because jujitsu takes 3 hours, like 3 times a week. I don't have 3 hours 3 times a week. That I had to say no to. Surfing takes 3 hours 3 times a week. Now, occasionally, maybe I can jump out there in the waves if I have a minute, but then I'm usually, well, I have other, like, I can go play with my kid instead. So I'm saying no to some activities that were fun hobbies that I just don't do anymore just from time. So that's one of them. I'm very much trying to get out of the day-to-day of running of everything because I want to be a visionary in everything. And that just takes having the right team, and we're building the right teams. But that's probably the biggest thing I'm trying to do is get out of, like, feeling like I have to control everything. But
well, you were kind of like on that lifestyle because, we picked Gabe to join us because he's like the poster child for lifestyle, right? Through real estate, cash flowing real estate. And I know, like, you're like the rest of us, right? As an entrepreneur, you're like, squirrel, shiny object. That'll be exciting until you, like, start and you're like, oh man, like, now this is something I have, that's an EIN and an LLC and I got to talk to people and I got to, so, like, did you find yourself hitting sort of the fantasy land, the holy grail, where you did achieve financial freedom and time freedom, really? Because I know, like, the period when you because the Bigger Pockets podcast, that took a lot of your time, and I want to get back and how you started that too. But, like, did you have a period where you're like, I've got a lot of time on my hands and this is great, and then all of a sudden you take that time to start a bunch of stuff?
yeah, so after Bigger Pockets, after I left Bigger Pockets, I mean, they happened kind of at two different times. One, in the middle of the Bigger Pockets, my career there, I got to a point where, like, I got my hours reduced, like, on purposely. Like, I got out of almost everything. I wasn't in leadership. I stepped out of, like, the board. Like, I wasn't involved in much. I had to show up for the podcast towards, like, the later, like, couple years. And so I got my hours way down to almost nothing. And I just started coasting. And I was not happy because I wasn't growing. Like, I need to grow. And that's what led to Open Door Capital. So on one hand, that happened there. But then after, I mean, Open Door Capital got launched during that time. And that was running pretty well without my day-to-day involvement. And then I left Bigger Pockets podcast and I was like, all right, I'm done. I'm going to spend time with my family. And we packed up. We went on a 4-month road trip around the country, went over to Europe. And that trip was unbelievably terrible and boring because
be honest, what really happened?
It was fine. It was fine. I just wanted to work the whole time. Like, and maybe that's just because I worked so hard for so long, but, like, I get so much joy out of building and growing. And so, again, I got to a point where I was just like my team was running without me, and yeah, I check in on a call once a week. But anyway, so I came home from that. I'm like, all right, I'm going to start a business. And I started 5. So there's a balancing act somewhere in there I'm still working through. The reason I started so many, by the way, is because I was like, well, I don't know what this is not advice. I was like, I don't know which one's going to make me a bunch of money, because I decided to make the Better Life Tribe a charity. So I don't make money that way. I don't make money off of Open Door Capital, really, because I donate my salary away, because I think it's a good way to raise money is by not making money, which sounds silly, but that's been a huge part of my raising money strategy, is by making sure I don't make anything until the end, which is, yeah, brilliant, but it doesn't make me any money now. And my book sales were faltering quite a bit. So I'm like, well, I got to get some cash flow coming in. I sold all my rental properties to buy Open Door Capital stuff. And So I'm just making, cash flow from LP stuff, but that's not very scalable. Anyway, so I was like, well, which business is going to be the best? Why don't I start all 5 and we'll see which one works? And so I started a bunch, a mortgage company and the mastermind and some other stuff, the 50, which I know, Gabe, you're in. And I started all this stuff and it's all been great, but they all kind of worked. And then when they all kind of work, they all require just a few hours a week. And a few hours a week add up to a few dozen hours a week for each of them. And yeah, so lesson learned is maybe I could have just picked one and gone all in, but it's not my style.
So, Brandon, I got a question for you. Like, what is, I mean, this is a big question, but like, what is success to you? Because like, you're obviously financially there. You got all these businesses. You have a wonderful family. Like wonderful wife and kids. Like, I see you as very successful, but internally, what is that? Is it like, obviously it's more than money. It's giving. What is that to you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I feel like success for me would be like waking up every day doing what I love to do, and also knowing that my wife and kids don't feel neglected. And those two are very, very difficult, right? I would work 100 hours a week, every week for the rest of my life because I love it. Like I love building stuff. And there's hard days and there's good days. But then now I'd be a terrible parent. So, I always say like, you can't judge if you're a good husband. Only your wife can judge if you're a good husband, right? Like we can't judge for ourselves how we are. Same with like, I can't judge I'm a good father. My kids can tell me if I'm a good father. My wife can tell me if I'm a good dad, but I can't really judge it for myself. So I want my wife and kids to judge me as a good husband and father, but also wake up every day knowing that I love what I'm doing. And when I was on that road trip and I was just family all day long, every day, that wasn't me waking up every day loving what I'm doing. My family loved me being there 24/7, but I didn't love what I was doing every day. And I wax and wane a lot. Like the book, The One Thing from Gary Keller and Jay Papasan, they talk about work-life balance is not a noun, it's a verb. It's a thing you do, you're balancing. And yeah, you balance. You go heavy one way and you go heavy another way. And that's like my life. And my wife is very accustomed to that. So she knows to tell me, hey, you're out of sync. Like you're working too much. We need you to come back this way.
Maybe we should author a book and call it The Two Things.
The Two Things, yes.
You have your
I like
family
it.
life, and you got your business building.
Yep. You got to have two things.
I think Benjamin Hardy in 10X is easier than 2X talked about like the seasons, how there's some people that are more like, they're like seasons where they're like, they take some time off, but then they go nuts and then they build something and then they get burned out and then you plan and then he like walked through that. I'm like, oh my gosh, I think that describes me and a lot of the people I know versus like the constant 9 to 5 work for the weekend. It's more seasonal, maybe. Anyway.
I like that idea a lot. Kind of like Tim Ferriss's mini retirements. I love the concept of like, I'm going to take 2 months off and go travel. I've just never been able to do that. I always start the next thing before I finish the first thing. And so there's always actually the opposite, like the seasons of where I'm doing 2 or 3, 4 things at one time. And rather than other than when I quit Bigger Pockets, that was a bit of a gap. And that was terrible.
2 questions. One, like, what fires you up? Like, what is it? Just like, what gets you up in the morning? Like you said, I was getting up, but I wasn't really happy because I wasn't building. Is that the answer? I was building something. Like, is there something in specific that fires Brandon Turner up? Like, you get up in the morning. Is it buying another piece of real estate? Is it building another non-real estate business? Is it getting to that $1 billion number of giving? Like, what's the one thing that fires you up every day? Like, we want to get behind the beard and in your head a little bit on what excites you every every day.
Behind the beard and in your head. I love that.
That's good. Yeah. Do you know my newsletter is called Behind the Beard?
Yeah.
Really?
I kind of stole that a little bit. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Not as slow as we thought.
What?
Not as slow as we thought.
Yeah, he's not
Yeah.
Delayed Travis. All right. I absolutely love when I have just a monster problem. I love and hate it, right? A monster problem, like, oh shoot, we got a big apartment complex we got to raise money for, and we don't have any ability to raise money. Like, we can't raise we had to raise $120 million in 8 weeks 2 years ago in the summer. And it was like, oh no, like, how can we do that? Like, I've never raised that much money in 3, 4, 5 years, ever. My whole life combined, I've not raised that much money. We had to do it in 8 weeks. We just landed a bunch of deals. And so like, that fires me up, where it's like, yes, overwhelming and stressful, but I love it's only stressful if you take the identity of a victim into a situation like that. And for people listening, it could be like, I got to buy a rental property at the end of the year. If you come at it from the perspective of I'm a victim, or this is going to be hard, or I can't do this, it's not going to be enjoyable to be like, oh, I got to go buy that rental property. Instead, it's like if you go in there as like a hero, like, you're William Wallace going to go like rescue the Scots or something. Like, just that mindset shift is like, no, like I'm a warrior. I'm going to battle. I'm going to figure this thing out. And then the feeling of actually figuring it out, like when we actually raised the money for those deals and we got through, one, we invented whole new systems of operating a company that I don't know any other real estate investors ever done ever. Like it was unbelievable what we built in terms of a marketing machine to raise capital. And that's a feeling that will last forever. Like I love that feeling of knowing what we did. And we're in it the last couple of months, we were in it with the Better Life tribe. Like the tribe, like we hired way too many people and expenses got way too high. And now it's like, shoot, we got to make some money. Like I can't give away $1 billion if we're not making any profit. It's just like, all right, we're going to war. And like we had to lay off a couple people and we had to consolidate some stuff. And like it's hard, but like I'm freaking William Wallace going at it. Like we're going to war. And so like taking that identity to it, I love that stuff. It's like when things are really, really down and hard, it's like Rocky and he's like getting beat up and he's up against the net. I don't know. I'm not a big Rocky guy, but like that's when I come alive. When I played Monopoly as a kid, man, the best is when you like have no money left and you're all out of money. Like that's when the game gets real.
Well, you seem like the type of guy that says, you said this earlier when you were trying to figure out how to backpack Europe, but like and I've heard you say this before in person when we talk, like you seem like the sort of guy that doesn't say like, I can, you love the question of how can I, like hold my beer. How can I make this happen? And it seems like that's a really great mindset.
Did you say beer or beard? Hold my beard?
Beer and beard.
Got it. Okay.
Fine.
You had a slight delay there, and I thought you said hold my beard.
Second question, Brandon, because I had two before I get interrupted. And maybe people want to just like, what is the day in the life of Brandon Turner? Like you live on Maui, you surf every 6 months. Like what is the day in life? You get up, like what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I get up usually pretty early, about 5. I usually work out in the morning. Not always. Usually work out in the morning. Go to the gym, or you ever done Legree? Have you guys done Legree?
I haven't.
You guys next
is
week
that, is that like yogurt? What is that?
It's like I go in there. I was so intimidated the first time. You go in there and it's like 12 women, super hot, all spandex from Lululemon, and there's these giant machines with like all these levers and pulleys and stuff, and then they just murder you for like an hour. They just like murder you on these machines and like just hurt your body in every possible way. And it's like the best workout I have ever done. It's so good. Not great for upper body, really good for core and lower body. So like that's my leg day now is Legree. Gym is upper body. Anyway, so I go to the gym. I come home between 7 and 8. I'm with the kids, family, breakfast, getting them out the door, all that. Every morning I also usually before the kids get up, I'll plan my day. So I have like my habit tracker. The most important thing I do all day long is my habit tracker. And that's even more important than dates and with my kids and wife. It's more important than all this stuff because it makes everything else work. So I track my habits. Like, am I spending enough time with my wife? Am I, tucking the kids in? Am I reading my Bible? Am I doing the things that I know I want to do to be the kind of person I want to be? I track it every morning. It takes 5 minutes. Then typically from about 8 till 1, I'm usually just working on either phone calls or writing. Like Monday's writing day, Tuesday's phone call day, Wednesday's content, Thursday's phone call day, and Friday's just usually makeup day of whatever I didn't get done during the week. Or if I got everything done, I'll just take the day off and go hang out with the family. So that's my day to day. Usually by mid-afternoon, I'm done. 2, 3 o'clock. The rest of the world's off work, so I figure I can stop.
Are you writing more books, Brandon?
No, I write a lot. I mean, not right now. I have a few that I want to write. I write, this surprises a lot of people, but I write almost every piece of content that I make a video about, like on Instagram. All my like videos I'm talking to the camera, almost all those are teleprompted. I write everything ahead of time, even if it looks like I'm just like making it up on the spot. Usually it's teleprompted. I just believe it's hard to hit all the psychological points right on a social media video when I'm winging it. And so I write a lot of social media content. I write a lot of ads. We spend a lot of money on ads between all my companies. And so I write a lot of ads, a lot of tweets, a lot of that stuff.
But before we jump off, as we're kind of wrapping this up, I'm curious, and maybe there's not a blanket piece of advice you would give, but our listeners and then 0 to 100 Tribe, it's a lot of those that are just getting started, or they're starting. Maybe they have no units, maybe they're at 50, 60 units, and everything in between. But what advice would you have for those that want to get to the scale that you have? Like if you could give one single bit of advice, whether it's someone that hasn't started or just started, or they're well on their journey, to get them to that level of success that you are currently at right now?
The way you ask questions to yourself and the type of questions you ask are dependent on your mindset. So example would be, how do I flip a house a year versus how do I flip 100 houses a year? Your mindset determines those questions. So the advice I would have for people is to ask yourself, which of the following 4 mindsets do you currently have? Number 1 is the DIY mindset. So I believe that the solution to my problems is by doing everything myself. So if that's the mindset you take, those are the questions you're going to ask. How do I flip a house by myself? How do I learn how to put in carpet? How do I learn how to find a tenant for my rental? How do I do everything myself? The next mindset is the manager mindset. The manager says, well, I'm going to pull in a couple other people, maybe like my brother-in-law over here and the property manager, and I'll call a plumber, but I'm still running things. That's a different mindset. You can do more with that mindset than you can with the DIYer. Then there's like the CEO mindset, which says, I'm going to build a company. This company, I'm going to hire these employees. I'm going to have a team. I'm going to be in charge of culture, and I'm going to drive this, but I'm the leader and we have systems and processes. You can do a lot as a CEO. But then there's another mindset that says, I'm the architect. This is like the Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson. It says, I want that company over there. I'm going to design the company. I'm going to give the vision for the company, but I'm not building it. I'm not in the middle of the company like a CEO would be with everyone reporting to me. I'm going to think about the company and it's going to be built by somebody else. And so the reason I give that advice is because every level works. You can DIY yourself there. You can manage your way there. You can CEO your way there, or you can architect your way there. But every level has a limit on how fast you can grow. So if you're in a hurry to try to grow and try to get at financial freedom, is you're going to have to elevate that mindset. That means to improve your leadership, to improve your communication abilities, to improve your vision casting abilities, which is a skill set to be able to cast a vision for your team or for the people around you. You're going to have to get good at hiring. You're going to get good at inspiring. All those things require a higher level mindset. And for most people, they're not willing to pay the price to become that person, and therefore they're going to be stuck at a lower limit. And it's going to take them longer to reach the higher levels of financial freedom and success that they want. So work on your mindset by surrounding yourself with smart people like these gentlemen and Mitchell who are on this call.
Unreal. This is how we have to end this? I thought we were going to go out with it. Anyway,
do not edit that out. Do not edit that out of the podcast.
Well, Mitchell, it's fine.
You guys are great, and you too, Mitchell. Thanks for joining us.
Mitchell, you're great too.
Yeah. Hey, I am great.
He called you a beautiful man.
Affirmations.
Right.
I did. I said how gorgeous you were, and then you just Anyway,
Mitchell,
that was really natural.
Considering your past, man, you look really good.
Oh my God!
What the heck is Brandon talking about?
I was really planning on hitting you with that at some point, but I just didn't. So
beat you to it. Well, we have one last question to take you out here. We ask all of our podcast guests this. You're on the couch. You're on your buddy's couch. You lost everything. I'm not sure where the family fits in. It's kind of a difficult part of the question. But you have your network. You have your knowledge, but you don't have any money and you own nothing. You're on your buddy's couch eating pizza. If that, like, what do you do? What's the first thing you do that day? What's the first thing you do that week, that month? Like, how do you build it back?
Yeah, great question. I would immediately get off that couch. I'd finish the pizza because pizza's good.
And the Law & Order episode.
Hopefully it's pepperoni. Yeah, I'd probably finish the Law & Order episode. I would put myself in doing whatever I had to do to put myself in a room with people that were succeeding and had a high level mindset. Mindsets are incredibly contagious, whether you want them to be or not. And when you're on that couch and you're struggling, like and most people listening to this podcast, maybe not most, I don't know your audience, but most people listen to my stuff, like their mindset is broken. I'll just say that my mindset is broken in a lot of ways. And so we have to acknowledge that our mindset is broken, and I need to elevate my mindset to be a better operator, to be a better investor, to be a better parent, a better spouse, a better friend, all that. So I'm going to get into rooms, even if I have to barge my way in, fight my way in, serve my way in, or pay my way in if I have to. But I'm going to get into rooms where people are just naturally making the impossible look like another Tuesday morning. And I would just keep showing up in those rooms over and over and over, even if it means I got to go clean toilets to get there. I think that's the most important thing you can do is surround yourself with people who are where you want to become. Everything else is just details.
I love it.
That is awesome. That's a great answer. Well, I think that is it. Brandon, you're amazing, man. Even though you insulted me like 8 times and tonight's going to be a rough night for me, you're amazing. I appreciate you.
I try, man. You're a good man too.